I am now moving on to the three big substantive items in front of us today. A lot of people care a lot about each of these items. And y'all know I'm filling in for Mr. Scruggs as chair today, and I am not really sure what to expect regarding item 5. And I think it's important that we take it up first so that we can make sure we get to everything. So I have a rather lengthy statement that the chair asked me to read, and this has been emailed to the police department, so no surprises. So this is the statement of our chair, Ed Scruggs. For several years, this commission has met the first Monday of each month to discuss public safety and issues relating to our emergency service departments. I have come to admire greatly the men and women of our police, fire, and EMS for the often selfless and heroic work they do to keep our citizens safe. Yet over time, I have also come to realize solid and just public safety policy is the product of a partnership between government and the public and our emergency service departments. Key to that partnership is trust and the upholding of community values. Meeting these expectations may offer institutional challenge as times and community values evolve, but this is a challenge we have no choice but to meet in order to preserve a growing, prosperous city where both personal safety and human rights are not only respected but promoted. For the record, it is worth noting that our state's troubled history of racially motivated violence, discrimination, and bigotry. In recent decades, Austin has, and hopefully will, continue to embrace the role of leading Texas away from its dark past. For these reasons, in this time, we cannot accept nor harbor racist, homophobic, or other discriminatory actions within the ranks or the administration of the Austin Police Department. Allegations detailed in the police oversight report are alarming and must be subject to immediate internal and external investigation. To restore public trust, these investigations must be transparent and reflective, offering ample opportunity for public engagement and an openness to identifying, discussing, and implementing possible reforms. It has been reported an investigation may take 10 months or longer to complete. In my judgment, and again I'm speaking here for Ed Scruggs, in my judgment, the community cannot wait that long to see meaningful action. That is why I am recommending the Public Safety Commission receive monthly public presentations detailing investigatory findings, resulting disciplinary actions, retraining efforts, and suggested structural reforms. A highly transparent process promoting sustained engagement of all stakeholders is the only way to protect the viability of our critical public safety partnership. It is the right thing to do, and the citizens of Austin deserve nothing less. So that's the statement by Ed Scruggs, our chair, who couldn't be here today. I started and then stopped a number of drafts trying to put down my statement, my reaction to all of this. In the end, I didn't bring anything written. I want to give people who feel affected an opportunity to express that or ask questions. I'm told that the city attorney, Ann Morgan, has prohibited Chief Gay from answering questions, but I'll let him, I don't think that prevents us from asking them, putting questions out into the public realm, but it may be that he is not allowed to respond. So with that, if anyone wants to speak. And we do have people signed up to speak. So let me call up Carrie Roberts.
Good afternoon. I'm Kerry Roberts, the Executive Director of the Greater Austin Crime Commission. Thank you. I think this is a timely discussion given that the council will consider a related resolution, item 66, on Thursday. The Greater Austin Crime Commission supports the council resolution to audit and review police training, but suspending academy classes will undermine public safety when aggravated assaults and robberies have increased and response times are slower because the department is understaffed. We also endorse the city manager's decision to order an outside investigation involving the Austin Police Department executive team and alarming allegations of racial slurs used by a former assistant police chief. The city council should consider those findings before making policy changes. What I've handed out to you, and I hope you'll take time to read, is additional context and data provided by the police department for the city council resolution, which, as I said, is item 66, to be considered on Thursday. I think it's important that our policymakers understand the breadth of training that is currently going on in the police department, because I'm troubled by what I've heard over the past couple of weeks about, or misperceptions, I think, about what that training entails. I think that the police department improvements can always be made, but I think putting the community at risk by suspending recruiting and training is not the way to do it. So I would strongly urge the commission today to consider the sources of the information you may have received about alleged comments, specifically about sexual orientation, before making comments that may be harmful to people who are not in the public eye. I think the entire situation obviously is regrettable. As I said, we welcome the audit and review of the training curriculum and material of the police department, but I also think that the politics of personal destruction don't have a place here, and I don't think that our community supports that. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify our position or provide an electronic copy of the information if somebody'd like it.
Will we please do that, Carrie, and so we can get it into the backups?
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, Commissioners, I passed out the proposed resolution that Carrie has now given you, the counterpoint to some of the whereases, and I also passed out the Statesman editorial supporting the council resolution. So I hope we now have in front of us enough to have a discussion. Who would like to speak? Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Chair Weber. So yeah, I would say that, what's been most telling about this entire situation over the last few weeks is that while many folks that I talked to, especially those that had direct encounters with Chief Newsom, is definitely a sense of violation, a sense of disappointment, and a sense of anger. But to the extent that this happened, maybe not the particular individual involved, but to the extent that this happened, what overwhelmingly is not the case is a sense of surprise. And that's a problem. The fact that it overwhelmingly strikes many folks of color in this community as no surprise that people high up in the police department are engaging in this sort of behavior or harbor these sorts of thoughts or maybe using this sort of language is awful and speaks to really, really broad issues with the department itself, with people's interactions with officers, as well as with the lack of trust that much of the community has. And I think that what's what's being proposed is really just a start to find out the extent of those problems. And I think there are a lot of really good things about the resolution in that context, but I don't believe that it ultimately will address the issues at the root of this. It was really just an attempt to find out what's going on, and the extent to which beliefs like those that Chief Newsom is accused of, and has led to his sudden retirement and his apology statement, are pervasive throughout the department. And to the extent that that language like that can be used by someone for over a period of years with the department, and that person could climb the ranks of the department, and that would never go reported, that would never be found out, and it is telling that this sort of behavior may not just be tolerated but cultivated in the department. And I think it's been clear going back at least to 2017 that there are real issues with the culture that permeate from the training academy itself. You had 10 cadets drop out and pursue legal action over the training. Their letter spoke to real issues with the culture at the training academy, calling people experiencing homelessness and sex workers cockroaches, showing videos of people experiencing homelessness and sex workers, apparently purely to make fun of them. This was all what was reported in that letter. A broken culture that drove people away and has culminated in really high attrition rates at the academy ever since. Up to 40, almost 50% dropout rate from this academy that happened in February. There are problems all the way through, from recruitment to hiring to training, that need to be addressed, need to be investigated. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to stop everything, to look thoroughly at what's going on, to figure it out, to really put together an implementation plan to address these issues before proceeding forward with anything else. And honestly, those changes might help APD actually improve its retention rate at the academy, which again has been increasing. And if they're driving people away that are trying to be part of this department because of a broken culture, a culture that again appears to be rampant throughout, that's again someone at the top of the department can be accused of these things, and over a period of years without going reported, to me it speaks to a real need to slow down and to investigate everything really thoroughly. And so I'm hopeful that what's on the agenda for Thursday can help to start to uncover the extent of the problem that the department here faces, and how we can move forward. I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the beginning.
Yeah, sadly, as a Latina queer person, it really was not shocking to read the headline, "City to investigate alleged racism, homophobia, in APD's top ranks." People of color and LGBTQ shouldn't have to worry that an officer or chief is making racist, homophobic statements that have a harmful impact on the community. If that kind of harmful language is happening, and it's easy for me to believe something like that, it shows just why many of us have a hard time trusting the police to protect our safety. We should not have to accept top police leaders would rather protect their own, no matter how bad their behavior. Trust between APD and the community and the lack of confidence in APD's ability to police fairly is on the line. And I think I'm really interested in seeing where the conversation goes around what activists have been saying as far as, doing audits, looking at social media accounts, looking at revamping the police academy. We need some accountability. We need to make sure that we aren't bringing in officers that are racist and homophobic. We need to re-examine everything and make sure that there are real consequences when this type of behavior is known, and that action is taken as soon as something is known, because this kind of behavior, it shouldn't be tolerated. So we need to do all that we can to shed light on the problem, and the community needs to be keeping an eye out and really looking at what is going on within the department, and really call it out as much as possible, because it's shameful to be able to read headlines like this.
Dr. Hollis.
Thank you. I have a few things that I want to say in this context. So for those who in the room who don't know, I have a PhD in criminology and justice policy, and I did years, over a decade of research on race, ethnicity in the justice system and policing. This is my baby, and this is something I've studied for years, and I'm going to tell you the consequences for democratic policing. You are going to shatter this community. It's about to happen, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about what it does to my family and my friends who are members of the LGBTQ community. I'm not happy about what it does to my friends who are members of who are people of color. I've talked with some officers who have said they feel that they have been denied promotion opportunities because of the color of their skin. That is unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it cannot happen here. We will not tolerate it as citizens in this community. It has to stop. I appreciate what Commissioner Harris has said about training, but it's not a training issue. It's a culture issue, and it starts at the top, and it has got to stop with you guys. And I am abhorred by the lack of response that I have seen out of the police department. It is not tolerable. You guys should have immediately been out ahead of this, telling the people of color and the LGBTQ community that you have their backs, and you have now hurt relations with them, and it is not acceptable. And yeah, I'm angry, and I'm gonna be angry, as they should be. And I'm angry on my friends' behalf. And I call them friends because I support their communities, and I'm an ally to both. Democratic policing comes down to one thing. We need equality, and we need policing that promotes equity. Policing needs to serve, in the word of John Rawls, to reduce extant inequalities in our community, not serve to exacerbate existing inequalities. We cannot continue down this road. It is not acceptable. And as a community member and as a commissioner, I will not accept it.
Ms. Alvarenga?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, needless to say, it is shameful what has happened. But even more shameful is that it has been going on apparently for a long period of time, and nothing has been done about it, which goes to show, again, the lack of transparency from APD in trying a lot of times to hide the problems that are going on internally in order to protect itself. I agree, this resolution is barely the beginning. I mean, certainly a deep investigation needs to be conducted. While I agree with Commissioner Scruggs that, yes, the majority of the men and women that serve with APD, they have the highest moral standards and they're looking out for our community. The unfortunate fact is that there is a minority who seem to have risen to the higher ranks that do not share those values. And those individuals need to be looked at. They need to be properly sanctioned. And I hope that APD is willing to do that. And it's willing to take a hard look at your policies and how you handle your affairs, so that we don't get to a point where in our community has no trust in our police department.
No? Dr. Linda? No? Kathleen?
I mean, I express the same sentiments as my fellow commissioners. I guess the thing that I would want to maybe open up for discussion here that I know has gotten maybe not as much attention is the portion that would suspend the cadet class, and whether we feel like that's a systemic issue with the class that really needs to be suspended, or if that could continue with some sort of modifications. And being that I don't know that much about it, I mean, I would like to open that up for a little bit more discussion.
It sounds like Dr. Hollis has something to say.
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake to suspend we are down so many officers right now, and I know that our police association is represented in the room. I see representation from them, and I know that they have requested that we not do that because of the potential for harm to the officers, and frankly, the harm to the community that could cause. I don't know that training is going to be the crux of the issue. I think it's a combination of organizational culture and hiring and promotion practices. That's based on, the years that I've observed and some, opportunities I've had to do research with the police department and things I've observed through that. I do, however, think that we need to be looking at policy and procedure moving forward for how these types of situations are responded to. And I do echo Commissioner Harris's concern with the attrition rates, not just for people of color, but we've also seen similar problems for women and members of the LGBTQ community who try to go through the academy. Unfortunately, policing is a hyper-masculine, white male-dominated institution across the United States. It's an unfortunate reality. And as I mentioned in the future items commentary I had in our last meeting, I was hopeful that you guys would start looking at the fact that you don't have a whole lot of representation in your upper ranks. I mean, once you get up into the commander and above ranks, which I've looked at, it's virtually non-existent. I think you have, one female commander at this point? Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay. I thought that was correct. And
one assistant chief. And
And
this
one
is something that we have talked about for years at this commission.
yeah, and this cannot continue. I think things are coming to a head right now. And I think, frankly, this should have been addressed years ago. We know this is a problem in the United States across the board in policing. We know this is an issue. But now we're seeing what happens with, unfortunately, we're in a new type of society where social media and text messages and all of this, you can't really hide it anymore. It's going to come out. And we cannot tolerate this kind of thing anymore. It's got to stop. And I don't think that stops by saying, stop the training academy. I think a lot of the people that you're going to be putting through the training academy, now I do think potentially finding a way to have oversight during that training, that's going to be really important, and making sure that we have some mechanism to keep it in check and make sure they're not being taught that. But you guys, I don't know that people realize that training does not stop with the academy. Majority of police training happens in field training. And the field training is where they get immersed in the culture the most. And that's where we need to have our eyes on, okay, who are the field training officers and what are they teaching these officers? Not on the training academy. The training academy is not going to be where it is embedded in the culture of the organization. So that's my opinion.
And I'll add to what Dr. Hollis said about that, which is that the Citizen Review Panel had written to the chief before about the importance of extra scrutiny on field training officers because of that very issue and how they have so much power to set the tone and the culture of the police department.
Yeah, I guess I would just, along with Commissioner Scruggs' request to be involved more in the process, I think possibly delving into the high turnover inside of the academy, and then also the training going forward would be, I'm kind of echoing what you just said, of utmost importance.
As well as hiring and promotion and looking at who are we hiring, what are our practices, how are we making decisions about promotion. I know a lot of that's handled by civil service, but once you get up into the assistant chief and beyond ranks, that's no longer civil service. And I've had people tell me they have no idea what they have to do to become an assistant chief in your organization. No idea. That should not be the case. It should be very clear that if I do these types of things, that is preparing me to be an assistant chief in this organization, not, I should make these friends, or, any of the other types of ways that we can have people move into those kinds of positions. We need the best for this city, and that means we need to have the best processes to select those people.
But your point is well taken. I think we also have to be cognizant that even when there is a clear path to promotion, that there are roadblocks for certain people. And I think that Detective Wells's lawsuit against the city is, he was disrespected in the most vile way by Assistant Chief Newsom, but at the same time, he's alleging that he was passed over for those plum positions that allow you to get to that point where you might have a leadership role, and it's a real problem.
I've also had officers tell me that for a Black or Latino officer to get to be in the same position as a white officer might not even need a bachelor's degree. That Black or Latina officer is going to need a master's degree. Well, their counterpart might not even need a bachelor's degree. They're going to have served on all kinds of different things, and they've voiced to me, hey, we got to go above and beyond. We have to do way more than anyone else to get in these positions. And that cannot continue. And I've heard the same thing from women. Now, I know Lieutenant Stevens has been working on a program for mentorship for women in the academy, but that's the women having to take it on themselves. That should have been a step taken by the organization, not by the women in the organization trying to help more women and lift up more women. It needs to be organization-wide and organization-supported.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, so I just want to, one, thank you for your original comments, and kind of respectfully disagree about as it relates to the training. As well as about, while I agree that the lack of representation in the upper ranks of the department is very much symbolic of some of the issues that are obviously apparent here. That said, even when there was a Black assistant chief, they were just subjected to the same commentary and treatment. And I question the degree to which people of color, people in the LGBTQ community, women are going to want to join their department, where someone that's making those comments can climb to the upper ranks of the department, where they might be subjected to the promotion, hiring, and other decisions of people like that. And without a thorough investigation, review of the entirety of the department, and of the training itself and how that's conducted, which again is partly responsible for the extremely high attrition rates that we repeatedly see at the academy, it doesn't make sense to continue to pull those folks in. Now, that said, I do think that this type of review and implementation of changes can happen rather quickly, to the extent that it may not impact that many of the actual classes. Obviously, there's already one in February that's coming up, for which my understanding is upwards of half of folks have already received their sort of acceptance letter, and may very well be changing their lives in order to attend. And obviously, the city should live up to its obligations and for folks that they've already made that commitment to. However, for the June training class, which was always an ambitious class set to overlap with the February class, which is different from normal practice, given that they'll have to share resources out at the academy. It makes sense to ensure that certain steps have been taken before that class kicks off. And if that means a delay, if it means a threat of a delay in order to ensure those changes, then that should occur. This is not the first time that APD has promised to make changes out there. As part of the Matrix report, also they were promised to make changes out there. To my understanding, city staff checked some boxes, and the council nor the community knows at all what really took place in order to justify the additional officers that have since been added using the matrix report as justification. So I don't agree that another blank check should be given to this department to continue to hire new people and bring them into, and I'll quote Chaz here, into a burning house. First, you put the fire out, but even then, that's not enough. You have to fix the house first before you bring people in. And I believe that this house is on fire, and before we bring new people in, we don't just need to put out the fire, we need to fix the house. And so until that occurs, aside again from those folks who have already been made promises, I believe that the council should say that there will not be any new classes until those changes have been made to ensure that cadets brought into the force going forward understand the history of this department, understand the extent to which people of color, particularly black people, are subjected to more force, are subjected to more severe force, are subjected to higher search rates, are subjected to higher arrest rates, are subjected to higher stop rates, are subjected to every possible negative outcome you can imagine from this police department. And if we don't have an academy that's educating recruits and cadets about that and ensuring that that they're taught in the best way possible to avoid those outcomes, then we're simply going to be perpetuating these same issues again, and we'll be back here in a year, and 2 years, and 3 years. So I respectfully disagree with the contention that we can continue with business as usual as it relates to the training. Thanks.
Ms. Alvarenga.
I disagree that we should have or that there should be a blanket resolution that says that there is not going to be a new class past the February one. I do agree that something needs to be put in place immediately that will get the process started to conduct the investigation, to make sure that the changes that are needed are taking place, and then maybe revisit that at a future date, after the February class, to see where we're at, where the city's at, where APD is at, as far as making any progress. And at that point, if no progress is being made, then yes, I think that a stop should be put to any new classes. However, I don't think that right now we should be making that recommendation that everything stop. The fact is that we need police officers, new police officers to be trained. Our community needs it. So I believe that there's a middle ground that we can find to where things get started. The fire is put out, as Commissioner Harris indicated. And while we're bringing in new cadets, the house is being rebuilt.
Dr. Hollis?
I love that we can disagree, Chris, and still be friends after this. No, in all reality, I think we need to take a step back, and instead of advocating for knee-jerk reactions, we need to think about where's the problem coming from, as well as what are the implications of some of the things we're recommending. So we've put or not we, but the department has put a freeze on transfers, is my understanding. So people can't move from one place to the other right now. They can't put in for transfers. So we're also blocking people of color and LGBTQ members of the policing community from being able to move to better positions right now. Is it correct that you guys are still in that transfer freeze?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. And so we could also be causing more harm by keeping people in places that they are causing more harm, because in addition, when we can't hire more people, we can't move people around. And so we could also be causing more harm in that way as well, by closing the door for people to advance their careers in important ways. And so that's part of the reason why I'm very cautious. We need bodies to allow people to move into the positions that they deserve. I also think, again, I don't think that's where a lot of the problems, the major problems are coming from is the academy. I think it's coming from field training and from the early career stages when police officers are most likely to become cynical. They're most likely to internalize some of the, I'll use the word, not just cynicism, but a little bit of ennui about their job when they realize they're not going to, be spending all their time fighting crime and doing all the exciting things that you see on the TV shows, and that most of policing is just driving around waiting for something to happen, and doing a lot of paperwork. And, the glorified TV version of policing is not the reality. Just like, fire and EMS, the glorified version is not the reality. The things we see on TV, that's not what it's like. And so, a lot of people come into the police department. I used to squash my students' hopes and dreams on a regular basis and tell them, guess what? That's not what you're going to be doing as a cop. You're not going to be off solving murders. You're not going to be Bones. You're not going to be CSI. You're not going to be any of those things. You are going to be spending the majority of your early years driving around waiting for something to happen. And I don't know that is something that people realize about policing. It's boring as heck 99% of the time. And the other 1% of the time, it's exciting and fun, or dangerous. And so I think the realities of this job, we need to carefully consider those before we make any kind of recommendations that could cause further harm to members of these communities. I'm concerned about the potential for transfers being blocked. I'm also concerned about us potentially not being able to have adequate coverage in places where we need coverage, because that also can contribute to more victimization of communities that, we're talking about compounding harms now. And so we need to be very careful about this. I think these problems are not going to be solved fast. I think they're endemic to the culture of the organization. I don't think they're going to go away overnight. I think it's going to take a heck of a lot of work, both on the part of the police department, but also on the part of the community holding them accountable as well, including us as representatives of the community, and making sure that every month we're calling you guys on the carpet and saying, all right, what's happening now? And saying, we're not going to tolerate racial profiling in this organization anymore. We are not going to tolerate any form of discriminatory behavior anymore. But we've got to start thinking very cautiously about not perpetuating additional harms through anything that we, out of a reaction, might recommend. And so I think we need to just proceed with caution, but also with we're not going to take this anymore.
So I think this has been interesting. I think I respectfully would disagree. I think a pause and a reset to take stock is what's called for. We're not going to see anything happen by February. With all due respect.
I don't think we're going to see anything happen
Selena,
in the next
but
2 years.
I mean, to take a dramatic step will imbue the entire process with a sense of urgency that we have not yet seen since this all started to unravel in September. And I think that putting the brakes on to evaluate things is what is called for.
But I think we're going to continue to see problems in the, 1,700 members that we already have. If we addressing the training, that's a really small piece of this pie.
But it is a piece.
And I think it's going to, as long as we do not address the cultural issues that are endemic to this organization that are causing this problem, so we put it on hold for a while. When it comes back, we're going to be right back where we were, and we can't tolerate that. We've got to get at the heart of what the problem is and eradicate it from this organization.
So on that note, can I interject? Okay.
No.
If you
I
want
was
to,
gonna just
I
say-
want to interject some questions about process,
Yeah.
because we're all, I love your optimism that something is going to change by February, but why hasn't something changed between September and now? So.
Well, and let me be clear about that. I mean, I don't anticipate that there's going to be 100% change. I mean, as Commissioner Hollis said, this is going to be a long-term process. It is not going to change in 2 months. But at the same time, I don't think that it's appropriate for us to just say, hey, let's stop everything without really having a process already set up as to, what are the steps that we expect APD to take? What specific changes do we expect to see? I think that needs to be placed there before we can say we're stopping everything.
Well, I would just say that, one of the one issue that jumps right out that is at the training academy is that there's, to my understanding, not one black person who's actually a trainer currently. And, again, I think maybe all the problems aren't there, and I agree that there are a lot of problems elsewhere, but that is one big part of it. And again, I think the potential impact that a delay to having new training academies pending some formal plan to address the issues that we know are out there are potentially being overstated here, in that, again, it's likely that either most, all, or half of the February training academy that's currently planned will continue to happen because, again, the city living up to its obligations. And that gives the city and the department and whatever investigation needs to go on until well into the spring in order to occur, potentially in order to have the June class start either in June or not long after that, right? So it really just puts the pressure on them in order to ensure that the issues that do exist out there are addressed in a firm plan that is agreeable, hopefully, to this community and this council in order to restart the process. And again, that next class would be in June. So there's a considerable window in order to come up with that plan, whatever that might be. That said, if it takes longer, it takes longer. And I think if, there are a lot of issues out there. And again, I do think that I really do question the extent to which, you're going to be able to recruit candidates of color, people that are in the LGBTQ community, people, women, to a department that hasn't taken some firm, concrete steps to address the issues that are clearly there at the department. And so it's incumbent on the city and the department to do something in order to address those concerns. And then again, if we continue to have academy classes that are well short, right, with high attrition rates, then they're never going to catch up to the vacancies that just continue to grow and grow at the department. And changes to the academy that come out of a full review may actually help address that, and in the long term, help them have classes that don't have 50% of the class drop out.
All right, so I said I wanted to interject some questions about process. So what I'm passing out is an article about another shameful chapter. This is from a year and a half ago, and I'll just read the beginning of it. It's a shame Austin Travis County EMS held confirmation of James Howley's retirement until 4:57 p.m. on Friday. The assistant chief left amidst an investigation by the Austin Police Department's Internal Affairs Unit into allegations of physical misconduct and harassment against 2 female colleagues. He did so after being granted a leave of absence, as opposed to being placed on administrative leave, allowing him discretion to drain his accrued vacation and personal holiday time, and upon his retirement was showered with accolades via staff memo from Chief Ernie Rodriguez. And then I take you down to the next section heading, what did the chief know? And it just, history is just repeating itself here. Why are people in charge of our public safety departments allowed to bide their time after being accused of things that should make them lose their job, and then are allowed to quietly retire while, citizens pay their pension? And that, to me, appears to be exactly what happened in this case, where it was known at the top that Newsom had, confessed to this vile behavior, and he got to hang around and bide his time. I would like some assurance that, unlike this assistant chief investigation, which was closed upon his retirement, so we never got answers about what happened. We never got answers about why signs of this type of behavior on his part were ignored, and he was promoted up to the point where he was an assistant chief. There's a pattern here within the city of Austin, within our public safety departments, and it's also relevant to item number 3, which we brought up, of not giving the community answers when there's problematic behavior at the top, but rather allowing people to, ride off into the sunset. And it's awkward, but with all due respect, Chief Gay, because you have served our community for years, and I have worked with you for years, but, have you been notified that an investigation is taking place and that you are involved?
Yes, the city manager has opened up a investigation against with a third-party vendor, Ms. Tatum, which is, I believe it's made the paper, and that investigation has started, yes.
And so have you yourself been interviewed as part of that investigation?
I will be.
And when were you first notified that you would be interviewed?
I got an email today that my interview is set for next week.
And when is Chief Manley set to be interviewed?
I can only tell you what my interview is set for. I don't know other people and their interview schedules. That is up to the investigator to contact the individual people and set up those particular meetings.
And so, and I don't think you can speak to this, Chief Gay, but if during the course of this investigation, so I'm just putting this out there for everyone. If during the course of this investigation it becomes obvious, as it did here, that someone in a position of authority is going to need to leave, are we, the citizens of Austin, going to still get the answers to what happened? And I'm skeptical, but I think that is, it's going to be really important for there to be an accounting. I'm sorry, you're just nodding. This investigation is not independent the way that it's been described. I'm going to pass out the city manager's statement about it. So, we're calling it a third party, but everyone needs to understand that, this third party lawyer is just working for the city attorney, right? So, it's not independent. He never says it is. Here's the contract. So what this letter of engagement makes clear is that it doesn't, what's implied to me is that this is a person who's being brought in to possibly against the types of lawsuits that are going to be coming, including, Detective Wells. And the highlighting here is mine. So I'll give you all a second to look at it, but
It's a contract for legal service.
it is. It's a contract for legal services. It explicitly says that the managing attorney will be Ann Morgan. And then if you turn over to the page 1 of 7 of the addendum, it specifically says that in regards to non-litigation matters, this Lisa Tatum will discuss with the managing attorney the precise services requested and whether a formal opinion is desired or informal, oral, or written assistance. So, like, what are we paying for here? What answers are we going to get? And is it ever going to become public? Is the investigation going to be concluded if, for instance, Chief Manley and Chief Gay decide to retire in the middle of this? Are we going to get answers about what happened? And this engagement of Ms. Tatum is not what I think the media maybe has reported that it is. So yes.
Well, and I'm going to just comment from my background. I don't know that an attorney can get at endemic problems that are usually the purview of social work, sociology, criminology, criminal justice researchers. They can get at the legal matters at hand, but for us to solve the problems that are internal to the organization, it's going to require bringing in people with expertise on policing, with a background in understanding the nature of these problems in policing, that, can actually go into a department and say, hey, here are the problems and here's how we can solve them because of a background and understanding of policing, police departments. This would take bringing in, one of our sanctioned, nationally sanctioned research arms or something like that. Someone who has background and experience and expertise in this, not an attorney who used to be a criminal defense attorney who, frankly, is probably going to be there just to CYA for the city.
Well, and it's important. What questions has Ann Morgan asked her to answer? Does the city have legal liability here? I mean, is that the question that's being asked? Because I'm here with my legal opinion. Yes. And what are we paying for? What is the point of this? This is not, as was glowingly reported on November 15th by, our local media, that we're going to get some answers. Because I really doubt that we will ever even see what Lisa Tatum produces. And that's just, it's not right.
It looks like risk management.
It is.
Yeah, I think this raises real concerns, particularly given Chief Manley's time frame for everything that went on. Given that, according to his release time frame, upon being told by Assistant Chief Newsom about some allegations of which he claimed ignorance at the time, he directed Chief Newsom to go talk to City Legal. We have no indication if he ever did or not. And obviously, if he did, there potentially could implicate City Legal and other people in the city in what they knew and when. And to the extent that this is really meant to protect them.
And the conflict of interest
is
here with
really
Ann Morgan
unfortunate.
being the person basically in charge of what Lisa Tatum does, it's shocking. It's disgusting.
Well, and, I come back to, we have fractured the relationship with major segments of our public and our community. The police department has done some potentially irrevocable damage, or it's going to take a long, long time to recover from this. And I think putting, going to use, a term I don't use very often, but putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, there we go, is basically what this pseudo investigation is doing. We are not digging into what is the root of the problem, what do we need to do to repair it so that we can move forward and build a partnership between our police department and our communities, all of them. Commissioner Harris has commented on the harm that it's already caused in, the communities of color in Austin. And, Commissioner Nunes, we've discussed the harm that has been caused to the LGBTQ community, which is already suffering some pretty serious harms in Austin lately anyway, because of some of the things that are happening both locally and nationally. And so I think for us to say, oh, hey, we'll do an investigation and everything will be roses and sunshine is naive. And I think it does not acknowledge the historic problems that we have with these communities that absolutely need to be addressed if we are going to move forward and overcome this. We have a real chance. You know, it's like we're on the precipice of an opportunity to turn our public safety organizations into something to aspire to rather than something to be ashamed of. Right now, I think, frankly, we're something to be ashamed of because of the types of behaviors that we're seeing and the lack of response and action. And what it's doing to the officers inside the organization, as well as the local community. I mean, we haven't talked about the harm that this is causing people of color who work in the organization, LGBTQ officers in the organization, female officers in the organization, all of these marginalized groups that are in the organization, and sometimes twice marginalized because they're a member of a marginalized community, and then they're marginalized by that community because they chose to go into policing. And so we really, really need more answers, and we need more than just an investigation by, frankly, a biased party that is controlled by the city to get at this and solve some of these problems and perhaps fix something in this city.
Well, and I also want to say that my understanding of the intention of this investigation was to really understand who knew what and when with regard to the specific allegations against Assistant Chief Newsom and whether or not, you know, basically his behavior was known and covered up by people high up in the department or others, as well as in the city. And he was allowed to retire with full benefits without any form of punishment because there was basically a cover-up if that was the case. And to the extent that this is not going to uncover that, not going to reveal it at all, that is really unacceptable.
Well, and we're treating this as an isolated incident by having the investigation with those parameters. This is not an isolated incident. All of us,
Nor
I
is
think,
this an investigation. This is a
Yeah.
part-time, this is like hiring another part-time city attorney. That's what this is.
correct.
I have a question for clarification. So clearly, yes, this is an attorney contract where the city is trying to protect itself, right? But so is this supposed to be what the proposed council's resolution addresses? I mean, is this what
The proposed council
the independent
resolution
investigation
is-
and examination shall be conducted by
Is trying
an
to actually be
independent third party?
independent, yes.
Precisely. So, I mean, is the city saying we're taking care of that?
Well,
by
I mean, if
entering
you
into
read
this
between the lines
contract,
of
or-
what the city manager says, he calls it an important investigation. He doesn't call it an independent investigation, right? I mean, I don't think that even now anyone is actually investigating this, and that is why number 66 needs to pass on Thursday.
Sure, and I guess what I'm getting at, I mean, yes, this is obviously unacceptable. I mean, this is not going to get anything done. So what I'm understanding is that this commission needs to tell City Council we need a strong resolution that will tell the city that an independent investigation has to be done, and that will tell APD what we expect of them.
Well, at this, so just, you know, procedurally, at this time, there is nothing on the nothing has been moved for us to endorse or recommend that council do this. This is what is actually on council's agenda for Thursday, this 9-page draft.
So what are our options at this stage with that being such a short turnaround as a body?
We could continue to discuss this item. We could take action, or we can move on to the next item on our agenda.
And what are our options with respect to actions that we can take at this stage?
We can recommend within what council has asked us to do is advise council on issues related to public safety with regards to budget and policy. So we could recommend anything within that. So, why don't you discuss that?
Yeah, I haven't seen this resolution number yet, so I was just wondering if Commissioner Weber or Commissioner Harris, has background on this document here that's being presented before council.
So I think you're asking who placed it on the agenda? That I don't know.
Council member Harper Madison, and I believe with council members Kassar, Renteria, Garza, and Flanagan are the co-sponsors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, it's 5:10, and unless anyone else has any other discussion or wants to offer that we recommend something to the city council, I say we move on. Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Hollis.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the city council that they pass this, with strong encouragement that anywhere that they have investigation, this does not mean investigation by a single entity or body, but it involves a multi-pronged, which it says here, multi-pronged investigation, but where we are truly bringing in experts on this area to carry out this investigation and make recommendations that can be truly independent and unbiased in their work.
I'll second that. Any discussion on whether or not we should recommend this? All in favor?
Sorry, I'm still waiting.
Okay, take your time. Sorry about that.
Friendly amendment. I would like to make an amendment to the motion. In reading the end of the resolution, it does recommend that no new cadet classes may be initiated until the audit is completed.
Or until September 2020, whichever is earlier, right?
So how many cadet classes would we miss before September 2020 then? Is that just one?
February and June.
So can we, so the amendment would be that we request that City Council approve the resolution with an amendment that the February training be completed as is currently scheduled.
Okay, so Dr. Hollis, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if it has to be okay with me too, but it is. As your seconder. So with that, all in favor of recommending this 9-page draft with Selena's amendment, all in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? Okay, did you get that, Janet?
One abstaining.
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm abstaining given my appearance at a press conference with a few of the council members in the immediate aftermath of this, and my signing of a letter of advocacy for some changes as it relates to the outcome of this. So.
And let's just be clear that when you abstain from something, there is no conflict of interest. You're just abstaining. Okay, so let's move on to